This morning, it is my great honor to introduce Torsten Kulke, the 2018 Henry Hope Reed Award. Torsten, CEO of the Society for the New Market of Dresden, which he joined shortly after its founding in 1999. For close to 2 decades, he and the Society have been at the nexus of the painstaking effort to reconstruct Dresden's New Market, a site that was destroyed by Allied bombs in World War II and left to decay for 50 years. The New Market, which is the historic heart of the city, is the vast area around the Church of Our Lady. This church was the subject of an earlier monumental reconstruction project. The Society's efforts to rebuild, and in some cases, replace the bombed buildings, but in a manner consistent with classically inspired original buildings, were met with persistent resistance. The resistance came from the local authorities and the architectural establishment, but not, it turned out, by the majority of the people. In fact, nearly 80,000 citizens, far more than required of the 15% of eligible voters, signed a position in favor of a referendum to rebuild the more than 138 properties, including 70 anchor buildings. Rebuilt from their historic foundations, using the stylistic tradition of the original buildings, including the roof lines, materials, decorative elements, and even color. The city, however, refused to recognize the signature, so the Society found itself in a judicial battle. In the meantime, after investors showed strong interest, the dispute was put on hold for several years and finally withdrawn. The city, through its elected officials, were convinced to change course. The success of the project, while still not heralded in the German press, is nonetheless evidence in the high rate of investment, occupancy, and ongoing demand. There is substantial further evidence that the advantage of the underlying principles and philosophies that guided this project have taken root. Cities such as Berlin, Frankfurt, Potsdam, and Nuremberg have consulted with Torsten and the Society about their own rebuilding projects and challenges. Despite detractors and ongoing battles with local authorities, the New Market has become an undeniable success, a model for other cities. The grassroots of the Society began at Torsten's kitchen table, where he counted signatures, is now estimated to be a $1 billion initiative when completed. While the projected completion date is 2020, I strongly suspect Torsten has found his life's work. This is good news for all of us who recognize the central role of our built cultural heritage plays in our lives. For his outstanding leadership in the difficult reconstruction of the New Market, the 2018 Henry Hope Reed Award is bestowed on Torsten Kulke. Congratulations, Torsten.
Thank you for those kind introductory remarks. I want to especially thank the jury, the Notre Dame School of Architecture and Richard H. Treehouse for awarding me the Henry Hope Reed Award for 2018 in recognition of my many years of service as the head of the Gesellschaft Historischer Neumarkt Dresden, GHND, the Society for the Dresden Neumarkt Square. In the 16th century, following the Reformation, Dresden entered its first flowering. During the period of the Saxonian-Polish Union in the 18th century, its ruler August the Strong and his son developed the city further so that prior to World War II, it came to stand throughout the world for art and culture, both of which it once again stands for today. Following the enormous bombing attack which occurred on February 13 through 15, 1945, Dresden was an abandoned desert of rubble. The voice of those who wanted to re-establish the links to the old Dresden were ignored, just as it was everywhere else in Germany. It was difficult to re-establish the architectural traditions. Owners who were prepared to rebuild their buildings were forbidden to do so, subsequently had their properties taken away. All routes in the past were to be cut off. It is said that the losses suffered through the removal of the war ruins were even higher than those caused by the bombing attacks. The new communist state government wanted to create a new social order and a new form of socialist human being, living a new social city. Wherefore the old traditions were looked upon as a hindrance. Dresden was to become a modern socialist major city. Old land parcels upon which early villas and patrician houses, many from the Victorian period, stood were rebuilt with major structures in the style of Le Corbusier. Nevertheless, until well into the 1970s, Dresden remained a massive desert of the burned-out ruins. I can remember as a child have I traveled on a streetcar with my grandmother into the city center and saw this ghostly and yet fascinating burned-out buildings. Meantime, there grew up a kind of vast field of grass. All this left its mark upon me, and thus arose my present-day commitment. Luckily, in the 1989, there occurred a special fateful event, namely the peaceful collapse of the Berlin Wall. I grew up in East Germany. For me, it was unimaginable that this wall could one day fall. It was an unbelievable feeling. This freedom has enabled us to do things which back then were unthinkable. To be sure, prior to 1989, the German Democratic Republic in its final phase had already begun some reconstruction. In 1985, the Semper Opera, designed and named after the great German master builder Gottfried Semper, was reopened. However, the communist government was not in an economic position to realize a reconstruction program on today's scale. This turned out to be very fortunate, since it meant that the land parcels were left unbuilt upon. The people of Dresden had never ceased to believe in the reconstruction of the city center. On February 13, 1999, a group of Dresden citizens proclaimed a worldwide appeal asking for support for the reconstruction of the Dresden Frauenkirche under the title A Call from Dresden, so that this church could serve as an ecumenical center for world peace. This call was indeed hard, and because of this strong contribution response, reconstruction was begun. In 2025, it was finished. Even Queen Elizabeth II gave money for the rebuilding. In 1999, we founded die Gesellschaft Historischer Neumarkt, with the goal of giving the Dresden Frauenkirche a proper surrounding. The Dresden Neumarkt, the new Markt Square, and the bordering areas constitute a part of the historic old town of the city of Dresden, with European-wide significance. In the background of this picture is a new structure, an annex to the Castle Palace on the Neumarkt, on which was strongly disliked by the people. Ironically, is the name the new palace. This new annex gave rise to an enormous concern that it could become the standard for quality of new construction on the Neumarkt. Although already in 1995, Dresden architects let out a proposal for a set of zoning/configuration rules, which had its origins in German Democratic Republic planning and called for a reconstruction of a large number of structures. It was blocked by the then governing city administration. Instead, also called Atelier Neumarkt 2000. Program was announced and architects were invited to participate and make submissions. Later, further competitions were announced, all with a modern plan. The pictures display what at that time was proposed and what, by reason of the lobbying effort, was actually constructed by investors. At this point, the GHND organized a movement in 2001 among architects working in traditional styles, called Contra the Atelier 2001. The positive response to the Atelier Neumarkt 2000 of the people who still had the pictures of the old Dresden with its beautiful Baroque and classical facades and heads was very limited. Reconstruction, therefore, appeared to be the more appropriate course, support as it was by the Dresden inhabitants, in order to restore a sense of identity to the city center. The resistance to reconstruction was formed above all by the architectural establishment. This resistance was already noticeable at the time of the rebuilding of the Frauenkirche. Our ideas were denigrated with the words stage scenery / Disneyland architecture. In addition, at the beginning, there was hardly any support from the political forces. I was aware that we needed political support for our project, and therefore I led a people's referendum in the fall of 2002. They were called upon under the title Yes to the Historic Neumarkt to make a decision. Almost 18,000 people signed this referendum, including over 63,000 who were inhabitants of the city. That was much more than required 15% eligible voters. To this very day, this success forms the foundation for the political legitimacy of the demand for the restoration of the Dresden Neumarkt to its condition before the destruction of 1945. This reconstruction is indeed to be done on a scientific basis derived from the available archival sources. For this purpose, blueprints, photos, paintings are being utilized on the former 138 ground lots. About 70 so-called Leitbauten, or leading structures, and Leitfassaden, or leading facades, are being erected. They are so named because they are intended as model on which the remainder of the buildings are to be oriented. What happened thereafter during the next decade and a half was a so-called house-to-house war over every new house with a city planning commission, the national press, and the very influential part of the architectural and monument protection community. We opposed the planning proposals of this architectural establishment with computer pictures, showing our ideas and through them decided public opinion via the local press in their favor. These almost perfectly photorealistic computer pictures were financed by Günter Blobel through the Friends of Dresden, New York, a non-profit organization he founded. Because most of the land lots were city property over the sale of which the city council made the decisions to potential owners were forced to pay attention to the demands of the city inhabitants in most cases, or at least over compromises. But one couldn't just sit there and criticize the owners and investors. We needed an example project. Therefore, under my direction, the society acquired a parcel of land, constructed a traditional bourgeois house, and transferred it for further use to a foundation. Today, the foundation very successfully promotes the international exchange of students by offering living quarters for music students at the Karl Maria von Weber College for Music in Dresden. The administration of this foundation has been in my hands since its establishment. All work on the Dresden Neumarkt is expected to be finished by 2022. The plans for the last area are already done. Total reconstructions costs, including the rebuilding of the Frauenkirche, are estimated at $1 billion. Already today, before it is even completed, the Neumarkt is the new most visited place in Dresden by both city inhabitants and tourists. It is not for nothing that this area is called the heart and soul of the city of Dresden. For it is here that the city identity and the city inhabitants' spirit and dedication are united. Even after the Neumarkt is finished, our work will go on. Since 2011, I have been involved with the society in the rebuilding of the historic Neustädter Markt area on the opposite bank of the Elbe River, the third most important location in Dresden. This May, a large international two-stage competition will begin for proposals to rebuild it in an old style and eliminate a major long-distance highway which bisects the area. The reconstruction of the Frauenkirche and the Neumarkt made a major contribution to the discussion of our architectural heritage. Everywhere in Germany, there are now reconstruction efforts underway. So, for example, in Potsdam, the city palace of Friedrich II has been rebuilt, and the cornerstone of the famed Garrison Church has just been laid. In Berlin, we are expecting the completion of the rebuilding of the Berlin City Palace in 2019. In the autumn of this year in Frankfurt, on the area between the cathedral and the famed Romerplatz, the Roman Square will be opened, which will contain traditional architecture as well as a few reconstructions. Something has been set in motion in Germany which can no longer be halted. Once again, discussions about traditions in architecture and city building are occurring. The modern style has largely subsided. It can hardly convince people any longer with its building solutions. We were in the fortunate position in Dresden as well as in Frankfurt, Berlin, and also Potsdam to take part in this development. And we were able to provide help to these politicians, the construction experts, and the people from the experience we had gained in Dresden. I would like to close with the words of the famed architect Christoph Meckler. He has developed a very apt analysis of the present-day situation. Whenever through the length and the breadth on the country we erect new houses and indeed entire city quarters in historic fashion. This is nothing other than a response to a helpless cry of a society that is seeking urban surroundings with which they feel at home, comfortable, at ease, and secure. A feeling which we architects have clearly withheld from society in the preceding decades. As long as we fail to understand this, our architecture will remain irrelevant. Please note that Christopher Meckler himself is dedicated to the modern. In conclusion, I want to give my heartfelt thanks once again to the jury and Herr Driehaus for this award for which I am very moved. Thank you.